Hello everyone, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just come back from a late showing of the First Purge.
Yes.
Which is not the first Purge film, which is just called The Purge. It's the fourth.
Actually, can we describe a little bit both of the films that we've seen tonight? Because
You've only seen those two as well, have you? You haven't seen the middle two?
No, but what I meant was that we've seen Arthur Penn's Mickey 1.
Oh, sure.
Which, well, I find, a really beautiful movie, absolutely striking imagery. It's an art movie. It's a very young and really good and extraordinarily handsome Warren Beatty in the film. It's a film that is very hard to read or to understand, or to put all the pieces together. Anyway, and I suppose so we saw that at home on DVD, and then we've just come back from seeing The Purge, which it looks really cheap. I'm not sure whether it actually is cheap or not.
They are cheap movies.
Yeah.
Like all classic, all of the best kind of horror series, they made a lot of money from not very much budget. The combined budget of the four Purge films is $35 million.
Right.
And the combined gross is $420 million plus.
My God.
So very
it's a real
successful.
Money spinner, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just thought, that was an interesting contrast, like, this studio art film and this kind of real cheapo genre film, but both, I think, really incredibly powerful in their own ways, is my view.
Yeah?
Yes, I think that the First Purge, is that the name of the film?
The fourth film is called The First Purge,
okay.
Whereas the First Purge is just called The Purge.
I think it's the most powerful political statement in cinema that I've seen this year.
Yeah?
I do.
Black Panther was this year.
I think the Black Panther is by far the better film. It was more complex. It was also more nuanced, right? But this is right in your face. There's a program for white supremacists to kill black people, and we've got to defend ourselves. And actually, I think it makes that point really clearly and directly and powerfully, in a way that even Black Panther, by far the better film, didn't.
I must say, I was overcome with thoughts. It really fired my imagination to the point where towards the end of the film, I left and hung out by the side of the cinema to write stuff down before I forgot it.
So what did you write? So let's go through
I
your
wrote
list.
so much stuff. Well, let's say the idea, the base premise, that the idea of the Purge in general over the four films is that for 12 consecutive hours, once a year, all laws are suspended. Yes. Which means the idea is that it leads to a more harmonious society if people are allowed for a short time to do anything they want, and this largely means murder. So the first Purge film, not the first Purge, but the Purge, was a home invasion movie. It was Ethan Hawke's affluent family, basically, but their home being invaded. There's a racial component to it where they lock their house down, and then through their sort of camera systems, they see a black man outside who's kind of begging for help to be let in because he's being sort of hunted by these kind of prep school white guys. So they let him in, and then their house is besieged by these guys who want the black guy handed over to them. In that world, the Purge has been well established. It happens every year. This goes back to the origins of the Purge.
Yes.
And the idea is that a new political party called the NFFA, the New Founding Fathers of America,
yes,
is kind of rising up. And with the help of a kind of social scientist played by Marisa Tomei, who's the only actor in the film I recognise.
Yes.
It's her idea, this Purge, and they do it, they localise it to Staten Island. They say, we're going to try this out, this experiment. Staten Island is very, very poor. It's populated almost entirely by black people and other minorities. So there's clearly, it has it's reminiscent of, is it the Tuskegee experiments and other experiments that have basically taken place on black people and minorities in the past. And indeed the population of Staten Island is very suspicious of this. there's you could sort of say that like there was maybe a kind of genuine experiment going on, but they wouldn't dream of doing this experiment in a white neighborhood. You know what I mean? And so the film is way more nuanced than I would have expected, really. Although I didn't know much about the specific premise coming into it, and I think it's more nuanced than the first film was, in that it depicts a community that is being encouraged and given license to tear itself apart for someone else's benefit, really. And I would say that the action in this film, much of the fighting is not enjoyable, and it's not just because I don't think it's brilliantly shot and edited, although I think it's too heavy on kind of medium shots and quick editing. It's not kind of clear enough. But actually, it's not action I want to take any pleasure in. It's not as clear as goodies versus baddies for the most part, because the goodies are, generally speaking, the community, and the baddies are the politicians giving the community license to attack themselves. So the action, when the community does attack itself, I don't want to take any pleasure in that. You know what I mean? Let's say spoilers from here on. That's the idea.
I'm not sure I agree. I mean, the big villain of the piece is the director of this program, who's surrounded by computer screens, is well hidden in an office block, and who actually suffers no repercussions for the underhandedness of his actions. Because the thing is, it's meant to be an experiment, but this guy's not getting the results that he wants, so he cheats, and he brings white supremacists that are hired guns, to come into the neighborhood and actually instigate the violence to the level that he wants it to be.
Yes.
And really, what you get the feeling is the level that he wants it to be is social cleansing. He just wants to kill all poor people of color, to make room for white people, really, because the country's overpopulated, is what they say.
That's the argument that he makes.
So, and I think it's done almost with no frills. It's right. What's extraordinary about this film, why I think it's such a powerful statement, is because it doesn't hide behind anything. This is what it tells you. And, it's a very direct commentary on our present time, on Black Lives Matter, on, the attacks on black people. And it's full of, contemporary relevance. I mean, there's a pussy-grabbing, person on the loose, right?
Yeah. And so with a line of dialogue, as the girl escapes, she shouts "pussy-grabbing motherfucker." Or
exactly.
It's very direct. Yeah.
It's very direct.
And there's imagery which is incredibly unsettling. That there's when the militia is brought in to ramp up the violence, you first see it really with from a distance, from across the road, you see an attack on a black church where lots of people have holed up and are just trying to get through the night, and that's incredibly unsettling because of the similar attacks there have been in the United States in real life, and also the militias driving down the road in trucks full of dressed as Klan members. So I think actually it's a nuance which I don't like, that because I think what you say is right. It is very direct, apart from this one nuance, which is that these are not actually white supremacists. These are militia. These are mercenaries dressed as white supremacists. And the film does make mention of this. It does say these are mercenaries. And I think what the film is doing is letting white people off. If there's one central flaw, it's that you need a conspiracy and you'd need to hire a militia. Because actually the truth is that there is no shortage in America of white people who'd be perfectly happy to have the freedom to kill a lot of black people.
Yes.
And I think what the film is doing subtly is letting white people off by saying that there's a purpose around it or a structure around the people doing it, as opposed to just white people freely doing this.
I feel that's an interesting point. I'm not sure, and the reason why I'm not sure is because, aside from the KKK costumes, and all the white flags with the logo that really feels like a Confederate kind of Aryan party. There's also that moment where there's one of those guys that's really visualized, that you recognize, and then in the shootout in the staircase, you know, when he unmasks that person and it's that person, and he's like, you know, Aryan of the SS from Virginia.
Blue eyes, blonde hair, and the mask that he's been wearing it's like an emphasized kind of cartoony minstrel type mask, a very deep black skin and kind of white and red lips, and it's that I can't think of what the specific kind of imagery is, but it is that kind of emphasized really racist imagery of white people in blackface from years gone by.
I think for me, what struck me as, you know, powerful and politically powerful was that at the very beginning, there's this division in the community between those people who are activists, who, you know, they're all affected by poverty, you know, but some of them have chosen the route of political protest and being involved in churches and education and, you know, the traditional route, whereas others have gone into the drug trade, which is, you know, the traditional bane of those cultures, you know, but also a kind of infrastructure. And actually what happens very interestingly at the end is that those two, represented by, you know, the heroine and the hero, come together. So actually the problem is no longer, you know, a virtuous life in the church versus making a living out of the drug trade that actually blights everybody, but actually is both of those working against, you know, white people.
Yeah, like I suppose ultimately what you're given is a community
that comes together to fight racism.
Yeah, is brought together by the attempt to tear it apart. It's kind of, it's an idealized ending.
It is an idealized ending, but I like that because, you know, and also the thing that I found interesting was the way that the film unites blacks and Hispanics, which, you know, almost everything in that culture tries to divide as well. And in fact, my understanding is that the biggest conflicts, you know, are often between, like, you know, black and Latino rather than, you know, black, white, Latino, white.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the film does a nice thing of kind of, you know, making both of those groups come together in the face of a common enemy.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the first film is very white and this film is very black.
Yes.
They speak to two kind of different audiences in a way, but underneath the same umbrella of an idea.
Yes.
What it speaks to is the potential in the idea.
Yes.
You know, I think it's very easy to mock the idea of the purge. It's such a simple kind of silly horror concept, but actually there is in the two films that I've seen at least, there's a huge amount of depth.
Yes. It's a serious political commentary on the culture, both of the films.
Yeah.
Actually, though I think this one I find to be the less polished film, you know, but actually kind of the more powerful film. One of the things that I was thinking about when watching it was precisely that, because, you know, if you look at it in terms of aesthetics, or, you know, in terms of a well set up scene or a well acted scene, or, you know, what is a well shot scene, like, the film fails on almost all counts, and yet it didn't matter. You know, it was kind of like communicating an idea and an energy, you know, with enough relevance and force that actually, you know, the technical expertise with which it was rendered was of no consequence, or of little consequence.
And it genuinely got my heart racing. You know, I was invested. I bought into the character and I bought into the situation, and I was worried about what would happen. You know, and so even though I said earlier some of the action is not brilliantly put together, as you've just sort of suggested as well, again, it didn't matter because it conveyed enough sort of to give me that the tension, and in a way some of the imagery we were talking about as well, the kind of neo-Nazi imagery and Confederate imagery and so on, and these images that are reminiscent of genuine atrocities against black communities, that they are properly scary. I mean, I can't imagine really what it's like to live in a world in which the majority has really no problem reproducing these images, or has no sort of has no problem reproducing them, doesn't understand the kind of what they do to you. You know, this whole thing that's been going on over the last couple of years about Confederate statues. and that like black people are only really recently starting to be listened to about that, saying like, how do you think it makes me feel walking past this every day, the statue to a guy who wanted me dead because of the colour of my skin, you know?
Yes.
To be in a country where that happens, I can't imagine that. And I feel like in the minutest way I got a glimpse of that through some of the imagery in this film, just because of how terrified I was by it. It made me feel scared when I saw the Klan members going past.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
That was a scary image.
Yes.
And I felt it because I felt associated, or not associated, but I felt kind of sympathetic with the black characters who were being deliberately terrorized.
Yes. So what other notes did you make?
I it's a minor thing, but I thought there were some elements early on, before the drama really kicks up, where there's a lot of black people talking to each other for the benefit of a white audience. There's do you know the shows? You know the show Atlanta by Donald Glover. Do you know the show Blackish?
No.
Blackish is another American sitcom. It's much more kind of broad and family friendly than Atlanta. It's very good as well. But there is a kind of central difference between the two in that the conversations that the family will have in Blackish about kind of racism and about the nuances of how to live as black people in America or so on, they're conversations that like actually black people would never have.
Yeah.
Whereas in Atlanta you just get stuck into the world and people don't have kind of conversations for your benefit.
Yeah.
See what I mean? I think there are elements of that in this, but none to the point where I was getting annoyed by it. I think I think there is some benefit to making the issues the film's bringing up clear early on. Talking about, for instance, that when you talk about the drug dealer and the girl who's sort of against him, she says, you know, the purge is going to destroy our community for a day, but you do it for the other 364 days a year.
Yes.
That's very much a movie bit of dialogue, but I don't mind really that it's making it so clear.
Yes.
The problem she has with him.
Yes, and you know, her point of view is less complex than the film's, because in fact, you know, kind of whilst you get what she says, you also see that, you know, he's running a business, it's very well organized, it's employing a lot of people, half the community is implicated in it, you know, it's the only outlet that most of them have, you know, he's not hated within it, right? Like, yeah, so it's, what's interesting is that this drug dealer figure is seen to have more of a stake and more of a responsibility towards that community than the government does. Which I think is almost a revolutionary statement in an American film.
Yeah.
You know, I found that quite incredible to see it. You know, because the white guy with Marisa Tomei, whose name I can't remember, the one who's directing everything and who's setting drones on the populace and everything, he is the government representative, right? You know, so like, yeah, he's white, he's a little bit chubby, he's not very good looking, he's completely safe, you know, and he's not averse to giving orders to kill the scientist, and he's certainly kind of gleeful at the idea of like cleansing the population of what he sees are its worst elements to make room for people like himself, and he is the government's representative. So, you know, it's a government against the people. I mean, you can't get any stronger and clearer than that, you know.
No, absolutely. It's reminiscent of the government uprising kind of idea is, I'm sure there would be much better examples, but the one that came to mind for me was The Handmaid's Tale, which is similarly about a kind of new uprising of government that manages to take over and impose its ideals on the USA, and in The Handmaid's Tale, obviously, it's very much about subjugation of women and a return to kind of biblical ideals, or what they see as biblical ideals. But the idea is kind of similar. It's kind of scarily believable.
Yes.
that it could kind of descend into that.
Yes. Well, it's not. I mean, it's not even like it's scarily believable, as you say, not because we fear that it will happen, but because in the last 2 years we've seen it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, those images of the police killing, you know, black youth who are already on their knees and unarmed.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, actually, there's nothing in the film kind of as shocking as that. So, you know, it's kind of it's not a sci-fi situation.
It's not
really.
so far-fetched. And actually, when the line, when for instance the girl says the pussy grabbing line, or when Marissa Tomei, when she kind of uncovers the conspiracy, says, you know, did you fake those numbers as well? You know, that actually is almost too on the nose. You feel like you don't need that. Like, I already get how this is drawing on what's really been happening for a while.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it kind of retcons, because the Purge films have been going since 2013, which, you know, no one saw anything like what's happening in the real world back in 2013, and so...
In fact, the first film was set in the future.
Yes, they are set in the future, but what I mean is that, like, this film sort of retcons what was happening in the previous films, because there's so much more in the real world to draw on. And actually, although I've not seen the middle two films, so I can't say that much about them, but certainly in the first film, there wasn't really that much information given about the wider world. It was very much an insular film just about how it affects this family in this rich community in LA, I think it was. So there is room to add on all of this wider context to the world. But they can do it based on what's been happening in like 2017 and 2018.
Yes.
As opposed to what was happening back then.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the audience that we saw it with, because, you know, one of the pleasures, or one of the interesting things today, and for me, one of the great pleasures of going to see films at the cinema, is of course the audience and the way that the audience reacts to it. And today was kind of special, because I would say the audience was maybe 80-90% black.
Yes, you could tell it was a black and minority ethnic audience, largely we were seeing it with. I felt like there was the only white guy there, probably. Maybe there's a couple of others, but yeah.
You know, which is very unusual, and also what was unusual, you know, was just the level of response. Kind of, you know, the way that kind of the audience was with the film and into the film and talking with the film and so on and so forth. So, you know, I think it's kind of it's interesting, because, you know, there are some films that come with an agenda that you feel, you know, they are designed to set a cultural agenda, to set the discussion on a particular topic for a particular group. And then kind of there are films that seem to come out of nowhere and that are really low budget and cheap and whatever, that in fact do the job much better than any of these, you know, kind of more important, in quotation marks, films in fact do. And I think this is one of them. And I'm surprised that it hasn't been talked about more in this way. I haven't heard anything about it.
I've heard nothing at all about the First Purge.
So...
Yeah. Mind you, I've not been looking, but nonetheless, you think it would pop up in a conversation somewhere. Everyone's been talking about Mission Impossible. You think they could talk about the First Purge in a way that would filter through.
Yes.
What did you make of the Skeletor character? Skeletor in the film he's the character that opens the film, actually. He's very threatening. He's got kind of scars on his face, which are kind of reminiscent in a way of like Killmonger from Black Panther, the kind of scarring, and he's a prisoner. So similar to Killmonger, I suppose, he's someone who's been through the American system and has become disfigured.
Well, the most important thing is he's a drug addict.
Yeah. And a killer. Actually, it's not. That's to be fair, he's not established at the start as a killer, but he certainly is someone who you fear will kill freely once the purge begins.
Exactly. You know,
and he's very deliberately being returned to society, because the opening scene is this interview between him and a kind of government official asking these questions that they're asking of everybody, saying, "Do you feel angry? Would you kill if you could?" That kind of thing.
Yes,
and
but that was for people who were signing up for the purge, because, you know, they're offering money if you're involved.
But the film opens up on him answering those questions.
Yes, it opens up on him asking those questions, but I don't think he's been released from jail or anything. I mean,
he's wearing an orange jumpsuit.
Oh,
that's what I picked up on.
Okay, I didn't pick up on that, so you may be right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why he's being returned to the world for this.
I'm not sure how to read him symbolically or allegorically, actually, because, you know, it seems to me that I read him as the out of control, you know, drug addict. He's definitely out to have the young boy who'd begun selling drugs. You know, and then kind of near the end of the film, his focus becomes, you know, the white supremacists. You know, he loses sight of, you know, his more minor antagonist and focuses on bigger and more important prey, which I think ties in with the other aspects of the film in a way.
Yeah.
I think he's meant to be kind of very scary and creepy and all of that, and I think he kind of is really.
Is it before the white supremacists, before the militia gets involved? He's certainly the major threat, really.
He's the major antagonist.
The major antagonist. He's the one you're scared of, and I don't know how kind of critical I should be of him, really, because he feels very movie-ish. He feels like he's there to be the movie antagonist.
Yes.
Whereas the rest of the film feels much more believable, I suppose, much more organic, if you like. But having said that, he creeped me out, and I was worried for the people around him.
Yes.
So I didn't hate that,
No, I think I think
it is a movie after all.
It is a movie. I think that character fulfills its function very well. Maybe more so, kind of in the last twist. I mean, actually, I think what I like most about him is that the film turns him onto the militia or against the militia, and the rest of the function in his film of scaring the young boy, of creeping him out, of all of that felt just standardish.
Yeah. But I suppose the twist in a way does, because it's a redemption sort of twist. So.
Except he's not a redeemable character. There's not. Yeah. So actually, I don't think it's a redemption.
Okay.
I think it's more like I might not like you, but this is my real enemy kind of thing. It's the way I read it anyway.
Sure.
Any last points?
The film is directed by Gerard McMurray. It's written by James DeMonaco, who also wrote and directed the first three. This has been directed by this Gerard McMurray, who we were looking at because there's very little information on him. He seems to be quite sort of young in his career. Produced Fruitvale Station, which was directed by Ryan Coogler, yes. Which I'm pretty sure we both love.
Yeah.
And I don't know what there is to say about it, really, other than that there seems to be a kind of... one of the things that was so impressive about Black Panther was that it was written and directed by Ryan Coogler, and they appear to have given him an awful lot of freedom, and you can kind of see similarities in the point of view of the world between them. And there's a kind of what we were sort of speaking as we walked back to the flat about how little you really see audiences like we saw tonight at Cineworld. That you see them every now and again, and you did it for Black Panther. They were out in force, But really, what it really speaks to is that cinema is not for anyone but white people most of the time, and you really see that when
there's always been this dilemma, or I say dilemma, but one of the things that I was thinking when watching the film is that our whole attitudes have changed. I mean, certainly growing up, my thinking was, well, we have to figure out what the problem is and then how to resolve it. But the assumption was that society wanted to resolve the problems, that they wanted to resolve the gun problem, that they wanted to resolve poverty, that they wanted to resolve, the problem with schooling and so on. Whereas actually right now you feel, well, actually the society doesn't give a shit. Like, it's not that we can't, resolve child poverty, it's we don't want to. So, I was thinking of how attitudes to those things have changed, and now I've lost my train of thought. I forgot why I was telling you this.
Well, we were talking about the idea that cinema is generally not for anyone but white people.
That's right. And actually, one of the things that was always understood in the United States was that though almost no films were made for black people, that black people represented a disproportionate number or percentage of total box office sales. Yeah, that the audience for cinema was disproportionately black. So I don't know, let's say, and I'm not sure of the figure, but let's say that the black population in the U.S. is
it something like 10%?
I thought it was something like 10%, but it's 30% of the film audience or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. That was always the dilemma, and that was known. So then the question was, since we know that there is a disproportionately large black audience for cinema, then why not make films for black people? And actually, all my adult life, I mean, I remember kind of, Spike Lee coming on, and then you think there's going to be a whole bunch of films like that, and there just aren't. So I think kind of there is a lip service to these issues, but actually there's no real attempt to resolve them, because I think people feel that resolving them is actually giving up something rather than gaining something, and I see it as simple as that.
Yeah, well, it's always the thing. I mean, it's like why white people think that the phrase "white people" is racist, and of course it's not. But what it does is just by having it pointed out that you're a white person means that your perceived neutrality goes.
Yes.
It's not neutral to be white. It means something, just as being black and being Hispanic and whatever means something. It's that kind of thing. I saw. I don't know if it was like a Kimmel bit or just some other thing on YouTube, but it was someone going to a cinema in a black neighborhood in America, and like reading out the top 10 sort of movies out that week, and asking, have you seen this, have you seen that, and of course, and they hadn't. And it was kind of revelation that like we really do live in these separate worlds, and maybe one of the classic sort of examples is the Medea movies,
yes,
which are ridiculed by white people and not paid, and actually most haven't even seen one.
Yes.
Anyway, and I suppose what I don't know what I'm guessing at really, other than to say that like it seems kind of enforced by a system that doesn't want to take risks, that there should be so few films that seem to kind of cross these barriers.
I'm fed up with this question of wanting to take risks or whatever. All cinema is risky, so it's not a question of not wanting to take risks. Filmmakers take risks all the time. Studios take risks all the time. It's not a question of risks. It's a question of not wanting to share power. It's as simple as that. Because kind of, and it does mean that, it does. I mean, this is why basic social justice doesn't happen. I mean, if there were, you would have 50% of parliament being women. That's basic social justice. If it's meant to represent the population, that's the population, right?
Yeah.
So, it doesn't happen because it's just it means that men would have to give up seats. It's simple. I think the same thing in Hollywood cinema, kind of, studios giving up power to black producers, black directors, black cinematographers. There is kind of, I think, an unconscious maybe, but structural and nonetheless effective exclusion that takes place. So that's why films like this one are so rare.
No, you're right. Actually, I mean, I was talking sort of very vaguely, but you're absolutely right. Like, there is no risk in letting black people make a film with your money, because they're just as good or bad at making films as anybody else, but it's that you are giving up power by doing so.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, you're right.
Anyway, let's end it here. I do think that to me it was a kind of a revelation. I don't want to over talk it, because in many ways it's not a good film, but I stand by my opening statement that it's the most powerful political statement that I've seen in cinema this year.
I'd say it's a much more complex film than any film of this sort really needs to be, and that's great. And it demands a complicated response.
Okay. Excellent.
It's not that simple. I really liked it.
Good. Thank you very much for listening. We are on
SoundCloud,
iTunes,
Facebook,
Twitter,
and eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Right. Thank you very much for listening.
Bye bye. Oh, is there anything you wanted to add in particular about
Mickey One?
Mickey One in comparison?
No, I think I've made it, because kind of, I just wanted to say at the beginning that we'd seen two really great films today. One which was kind of, an art film, and actually, arguably, the best American exemplar of European art cinema that I know of, right? that asks you to have these complicated responses and to figure things out and what does it mean and so on. And on the other hand, we saw like a cheapo genre film that actually kind of, led to at least as interesting and complex and so on responses, if not more so than Mickey One. I mean, I love both of them.
I thought you maybe wanted to draw on, for instance, the depiction of social decay in Mickey One, which actually to me seems kind of unusual for the time.
No, I don't think that's particularly unusual. I mean, I think the sense of existential angst around it, the thing about making it Kafkaesque, all of that in American cinema is unusual. The thing of not having a narrative, a coherent narrative, is unusual. To make it deliberately so, that's unusual. No, I just wanted to kind of say these are the two films that we've seen today. They're like 50 years apart. One is an art movie, the other one's a genre film, and yet aren't they both interesting and potent?
Yeah. The last thing I do want to emphasise that I think I do dislike in the First Purge how it protects the white audience from its own complicity in what it depicts. Really, I think it's the world the world that the people of the First Purge live in is decrepit and poor and badly served, and allows for a kind of home to crime and drug dealing. And the idea that it would have got that way through just like a few people at the very top of society running a conspiracy is, of course, ridiculous. White people are absolutely complicit, and I don't like that the film protects them a little bit.
Right. A problem that is resolved in this latest installment.
No, I don't think it's resolved. I think it's the problem in the First Purge.
Oh, in this film that we just saw?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I thought you were talking about the...
No, with the previous one. No, I like I say, the problem I think is that by removing the kind of antagonism to just these people in power, it sort of says that you as a white audience member don't have to worry that you would have anything to do with this. Like I say, I think it is a mistake that the film shows that the antagonists bring in a militia as opposed to saying as if white people wouldn't be chomping at the bit for the opportunity to.
Though I do think that the Marisa Tomei character, in a way, is the response to that, because she thinks she's doing one thing, she realizes she's doing the other, and something else, she gets killed off, right? So she recognizes her own complicity, and as she does so, signs her death warrant.
Yeah, I think that supports my point, really.
Well, I'm not necessarily arguing against it. I'm just kind of bringing that up.
Anyway, that is
an interesting point.
I consider that quite a serious flaw in the film, but not to the point where I don't recommend the film.
Listen, it's a flaw in the film, but we should all be so lucky as to have that kind of flaw in most films.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
No, fair enough.